now from New York is Robert J. Spitzer. He is a distinguished service professor in the political science department at the State University of New York, Cortland. So, Professor, the economy we know has always been important to Donald Trump and doesn't typically favor an incumbent if it is in bad shape. So I'd like to get your reaction to the latest unemployment and GDP numbers.
Yes, the numbers are terrible, to be sure. The GDP drop of 9.5% is the steepest quarterly drop ever recorded. These numbers were not kept back in the days of the Depression, but in modern times. So it's a dreadful drop. Unemployment claims 1.4 million. These are terrible numbers aside from the human cost. For political reasons, they're terrible numbers for whoever the incumbent happens to be. Obviously, that's Donald Trump, and he knows enough to know that his fate in terms of re-election is tied closely to the economy.
And we know there's a deadline coming up this week. Congress not really any closer to an agreement on extending that coronavirus relief package. What kind of impact could that have on Trump's standing?
I think on both sides of the aisle, members of Congress know that they have to come up with a package. Even conservative Republicans are willing to spend major money, as they have already, to buck up the economy, not necessarily to help people, but because the worse the economy is, the more dissatisfied voters will be and the more anxious they will be to kick out the party in power, which is the Republican Party. So I think these numbers coming this week, frankly, come at a good time, precisely because the old package is expiring, and this is going to put major pressure on Congress to act soon. They may not make the Friday deadline, but I'm pretty confident we're going to see some kind of compromise package coming quite soon.
And we have the election coming up in about 3 months. The U.S. president tweeted earlier today that he would like to delay the November election. And we did hear some Republican pushback. But do you think this is just a political distraction or a stunt, or do you think there's some real concern here?
I think it's part distraction, part ignorance. Frankly, the president is not well schooled on the constitutional structure of the United States of America. There is no call by anybody to do this. He comes up with this because this is how Trump is. He acts impulsively, spur of the moment. His gut instincts, unfortunately, those instincts have served him badly for the most part as he has been president, and this is an idea that's going nowhere. The scheduling of the elections is set in law and in the U.S. Constitution. Nothing is going to be changing about it, and it's just one more example of Trump kind of wildly flailing about, looking for something to grab onto to give him some traction.
And, you know, there's been a lot said in the past about polls, and I want to get your take on the current polling that show Joe Biden, his opponent, leading in many states. When it comes to the American voters, how much do you think can change between now and then, and just the swing of support when you have the coronavirus pandemic, you have the economy, and you have everything else going on?
Well, things can change. We're still just about 100 days away from Election Day. That's still a long time. However, you would rather be on the upside of those numbers than the downside of those numbers if you're running for election or re-election with a little more than 3 months to go. Can Trump turn things around? Well, I think the critical question is whether the country can get a hold of the out-of-control pandemic, which is under control in the northeastern part of the United States and in some other states. But as your reporters correctly noted, in most of the country, the pandemic is out of control. That's what's driving all of the other problems, the economic problems, and he's got to be able to exercise some real control over that, not only to help the people of the nation, but to salvage any hope of re-election in November. But the clock is ticking on that, and the closer we get to Election Day, the more those numbers are going to be baked in place.
All right, good insight there. Professor Robert Spitzer, thank you so much for joining us.